I'm having my wife Nancy come up and help me with this. Yeah, she's the better half, that's for sure. I don't get that kind of applause. And there's a reason, actually. Okay. Okay, you can.
So, good morning. We thought we'd share what happens in our household during the week. So if you'll take a moment and listen.
You know, honey, why don't you just relax and let me make dinner tonight?
My friends think you're hot. Isn't that cool?
Oh, can't your mother stay another week?
Is there anything else I can get for you, dear?
The ball game really isn't that important. I'd rather spend time with you.
Get a little farther away.
Don't feel bad, honey. I forgot it was our anniversary, too.
Let's just cuddle tonight.
You're going out with the boys tonight? You work so hard. Enjoy yourself.
Actually, I'm not sure which way to go. I'll turn in here and ask directions.
You're right. We don't need directions. Maybe you'll find a shortcut.
Here, you take the remote. As long as I'm with you, I don't care what we watch.
Don't worry about taking the trash out. I can use the exercise.
So. Word for word, that's how we talk. Well, today I'm continuing in the book of Mark, and the message is of marriage, divorce, and being single. So it includes everybody, really. And though he himself was never married, Jesus played a part in inventing marriage, he and the Father and the Holy Spirit. So it makes sense that both he and the Father would certainly know how to build a successful marriage. He also knows why marriages fail. And anybody who's been married for more than 10 minutes knows marriage isn't always easy. Too many marriages that could otherwise make it with just a little bit more counsel, a little more time, a little more effort, too many of them end up in divorce court. And many who go through divorce sometime later, might take years or even decades, look back and say, man, I regret that. I wish we hadn't divorced when it's all said and done. But marriage has its challenges, of course, and there can be plenty of friction. We know that. To be sure, I love this quote from Ruth Bell Graham, Billy Graham's wife. She said, "A happy marriage is the union of two good forgivers." The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, "For I wish that all men were even as I myself," that is, unmarried. "But I say to unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am. Now to the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord. A wife is not to depart from her husband. But if she does depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband. And a husband is not to divorce his wife." Wow, powerful stuff. Being a godly single person, of course, is tough, especially in our day and in our time. And it can certainly be lonely waiting for the right person to come along. But if that's you, you're in good company. Jeremiah the prophet was single. Jesus, of course, was single. Jesus' good friends, Lazarus, Mary and Martha, were likely single as well. John the Baptist was always the groomsman, never the groom. Paul the apostle was single, at least when he wrote the epistles. It's possible he was married many years before. We don't know, because he was part of the Sanhedrin. Either way, on the other hand, most, if not all, the disciples of Jesus were married. The Apostle Paul says a requirement of pastoring is to be the husband of one wife. That's not to say a single person couldn't be a head pastor, but he's saying husband of one wife. Marriage is supposed to be a picture or a reflection of the Trinity, really. And the bond between spouses is meant to reflect the bond of love between the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But not all marriages seem to reflect the Trinity and the Godhead very well. That reminds me, I heard about a couple who drove down a country road for several miles, not saying a word, and earlier discussion had led to an argument, and neither one of them wanted to concede their position. The atmosphere in the car was getting colder and colder. And as they passed a barnyard full of mules and goats and pigs, the irate husband asked sarcastically, "Relatives of yours?" The wife replied, "Yep, they are. They're in-laws." In today's world, in America, nearly 70% of couples live together before marriage. It's not like the old days. And many of them believe, a huge percentage believe, that living together before marriage will improve their odds of marital success. But a recent study that was done over many, many years came to a different conclusion. They found that people who live together are much more likely to divorce than those who don't live together before marriage. It doesn't mean it can't happen. It doesn't mean it can't work. It's just the odds go the other way. Malachi chapter 2, verse 16 puts it this way: simply, God hates divorce. That said, God doesn't hate people who have been divorced. Big distinction. He hates divorce. He doesn't hate the people who have gone through divorce or are divorcing. So if you've been divorced or are now remarried, and maybe you've done that more than once or twice or three times, know that God still loves you and still has a plan for your life. Some have been divorced, not because they wanted to divorce, but because the other person walked out of the marriage. Paul says something interesting about this very scenario. He says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 15, if the unbeliever departs, let him depart. Wow. A brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases. You could take that to mean that it is possible to remarry under certain circumstances. Even so, divorce is a tearing of the heart. It's a tearing of the soul. So Mark records what Jesus says about it. And so we continue in Mark chapter 10 this week. Jesus set out from there and went to the region of Judea and across the Jordan. Then crowds converged on him again, and as was his custom, he taught them again. Some Pharisees came to test him, and they asked him, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? He replied to them, what did Moses command you? They said, well, Moses permitted us to write divorce papers and send her away. But Jesus told them, he wrote this command for you, back in Deuteronomy chapter 24. He wrote this command for you because of the hardness of your heart. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother, and the two will become one flesh. And so they're no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. And when they were in the house again, the disciples questioned him about this matter, and he said to them, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. Also, if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. Though God hates divorce, I would never tell a woman who's living in a home where she's being beaten and slapped around and battered to stay in the home because God says, don't divorce. I would never tell her to go through that. I wouldn't tell the spouse who's being cheated on repeatedly by their spouse to stay in there because you're not supposed to divorce. I would never tell them that. I don't think God wants them to stay in those kind of situations either, because those things aren't really a marriage. That's not how God intended it. It could be in those very tense situations like those, or in which the couple constantly gets in angry fights, yelling, screaming, throwing things, even hurting each other, that a certain time of separation is needed, well, each gets some solid counsel and or ministry. But my general advice for couples who are considering divorce and they've really been through the ringer is to give it another shot. Get some counsel. Get some ministry. Give it another chance, if possible, before filling out the paperwork. One reason is because not only is there a tearing of the heart of those who are going through divorce or divorcing, but most often in a divorce, the kids get ripped off. Somebody said this, I don't remember who said it, but they said parents who rationalize their divorce as somehow better for the kids are engaging in denial, plain and simple. A man named Greg Bellow was 8 years old when his father, who at the time was a very famous author, told him that he and Greg's mom were separating when he was 8 years old. And he said at the time, this is what he said, this is a quote, "I felt like a deep sea diver cut off from my air supply." And then he went on and he said, "I'm 69 now, and I'm still the drowning deep sea diver." Not long ago, a group of adults looked back on their childhoods and recalled watching their parents divorce. They still have negative feelings about it and have experienced impacts in their adult life as a result. One of them said, "I believe my parents' divorce instilled a fear of abandonment in me regarding all of my relationships." He went on, "I developed problems trusting people to be there for me, believing that when the going got rough, people would leave me." And he said, "As much as I desperately craved intimacy and love, the closer someone came to me, the more terrified I was of getting hurt or abandoned. I unconsciously," this is what he said, "I unconsciously sabotaged relationships as I didn't know how to receive and accept real love." So parents, if you have kids and you're going through a divorce, remember that. Remember that. You gone through one recently. Don't assume your kids are okay with it. Occasionally one might say, "How come, what took you so long?" But those are very, very rare. They do happen, but don't assume your kids are good with it. Don't force the kids to immediately buy into your new blended family. Give them some space. Give them some time. And if and when they come to you and they tell you that some things that you don't want to hear, don't get defensive. Don't rationalize. Don't blame the spouse you're divorcing. Take it like a man or take it like a woman. Own it. Don't be surprised if the kids don't want anything to do with you for a while. Don't be surprised. You just stuck a knife in their gut. Don't be surprised. Love them, pray for them. Don't give up on them. Well, the regulation in Deuteronomy 24, Moses wrote that, and it was a certificate of divorce. And the reason for that was intended to protect vulnerable women, primarily by requiring a formal certificate of divorce, which restrained impulsive dismissal and gave the woman the legal freedom to remarry and to be safe from accusations of adultery. Jesus explained that this was an allowance for living in a very sinful society, not God's original plan for lifelong marriage. Well, marriages get in trouble for different reasons, but we'll go through just a couple of them, and many of them, some of you have been through. And if you've been divorced, this is not a finger-pointing thing. That's not why I'm talking about it. I'm talking about it because Jesus talked about it. Talked about it because it's important. But God loves you. But one of the main reasons people get in trouble in marriage is because of boundary offenses. They've crossed boundaries they were never intended to cross. If couples are living together before or outside of marriage, they have crossed a boundary that shouldn't have been crossed. Jesus quotes in Genesis 2:24, "A man should leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife." Notice, Jesus didn't say, leave mom and dad and cleave to his girlfriend or his lover or his fiance. A new boundary has begun. You leave the old life under mom and dad and cleave to your spouse and form a new life. So anybody who gets in the way needs to be cut off for at least a while until they understand that your wife or your husband gets priority now. The word cleave comes to us from a word that basically means glue. It means cement. It's like super glue. Some people don't quite understand boundaries, though. That reminds me of the man who said, "My wife thinks I don't give her enough privacy." At least that's what she says in her diary. Here are some boundary offenses in marriage. This is a no-brainer, but ignoring your spouse. It happens in lots of marriages. Some spouses do this, though, to punish their spouse when they don't get their way. Others ignore their spouse simply to avoid talking about difficult issues. Here's another boundary offense: speaking negatively about your spouse to other people, including your family members. Oh boy. Listen, if you're in a marriage and you have just problems with one another, talk to each other about it. Or you can talk to a counselor perhaps, but nothing good comes from going to our friends and family about a problem that we really need to take up with our spouse. That doesn't mean you can't talk to other people about your marriage. Just be really careful how you talk about your spouse and what you say about him or her. Another boundary: keeping secrets from one another. Maybe a couple are okay, minor ones. I love this quote from Stephanie Ortiz. She says, "My husband secretly lowers the thermostat and I secretly turn it back up. We both vehemently deny touching it. Marriage is fun." But I'm talking about deeper secrets. The truth is that when we keep secrets from each other, we limit the amount of intimacy we can have with each other. Each secret is like another brick and perhaps a growing wall of secrets, and it becomes a barricade between husband and wife. Now, I got to say this: not keeping secrets means that your spouse gets to check your phone, your texts, your emails, if the spouse so desires and there's a suspicion of something going on. It also means that you don't get to get all defensive and mad about it if your spouse says, "Hey, I want to see your phone." Why? Why would you not? You're keeping a secret that you shouldn't be keeping. You have a big secret with major implications, such as revealing a major expensive secret purchase, for example, that wasn't like the $50 kind, but more like the $500, $5,000 or more kind that you didn't tell your spouse about. You might want to be careful how you reveal it. And here's an obvious boundary offense that we're all aware of: unfaithfulness. Unfaithfulness. Sexually, I'm talking about. Or it could be an emotional affair as well. It's a huge betrayal. Huge betrayal. But even that doesn't have to end a marriage. It doesn't have to. In fact, some marriages actually get stronger after the emotional affair or the physical affair or the one-night stand if the couple begins to actually talk about issues that are deep. They get counseling, they find the reasons behind the affair, and they begin to communicate. It is possible, and I've seen some marriages actually get stronger. Because marriage and family was designed by God, Satan hates it. He can't stand it. And he wants to dissolve your marriage or make it rotten anyway, or make it crummy or whatever. So he uses certain tactics to do so. The number one method or tactic the devil uses to cause division in marriages is to make your heart hard towards each other. Making hearts hard toward each other. Jesus said the divorce was allowed because of a hard heart. Well, the devil's goal is to make one of you, if not both of you, hard-hearted towards each other. He might do this by getting you to compare your marriage with other marriages, or compare your spouse with other spouses. The enemy will point out and exaggerate your spouse's shortcomings and will foster anger and unforgiveness growing in your heart towards one another. He'll put thoughts in your head to compare yourself and your spouse with other marriages. Here's a tip. If you feel like the other marriage's grass is greener on the other side of the fence when you look at other couples, remember that the grass always grows greener over the septic tank. It's never as pretty as you think. They're presenting an image to you. You see a beautiful woman at work and she's always all put together. Well, she also goes home and takes all that makeup off and just kind of sits around. But you don't see that part. Maybe you're not watering your own lawn enough and you spend too much time looking at other people's lawns. The devil in the flesh, don't blame everything on the devil. It's your flesh too. Your devil and or your flesh will push you to compare your spouse to others. Like, why isn't my husband thoughtful like her husband? I wish my wife was skinnier like so-and-so. Or to compare your happiness or conflicts. They never argue like we do. They always seem so adventurous and so alive. But we never go anywhere or do anything fun. Or maybe compare your accomplishments. Gosh, they have a bigger house. They have a nicer car. They've got better furniture. They've got a big yard. They've got a pool. How come you can't make more money like her husband? After bringing up shortcomings in your spouse, the devil will try to amplify some things to harden your heart toward your spouse with bitterness and resentment. Bitterness and resentment. Holding on to hurts and offense will only make things worse. Speaking like Moses now. Resentment can build up over time in a marriage, but it leaks out sooner or later. That reminds me, I heard about a husband who said to his wife, when we argue and I get really mad at you, you never fight back. How do you control your anger? She said, I clean the toilet bowl. He said, how does that help? She said, I use your toothbrush. And then we feel justified in staying bitter because of our pride. The kind of pride that never admits, never says the words, Fonzie, some of you don't even know who I'm talking about. He could never say, I was wrong. He never could say I was wrong. That kind of pride. It's like a puffer fish. They're kind of cool. They're just so cool. But they blow themselves up several times their normal size. They contain a toxin that is very deadly to people and to other animals and fish and things like that. Like pufferfish, human beings can blow themselves up with pride and arrogance to make themselves look bigger than they really are. And of course, when they do that, they're really trying to hide insecurity, really. But they think they're all that in a bag of chips, and they're really not. And this pride can become toxic to a marriage. The kind of pride where you buy more house than you can afford, more of a car than you can afford, all those kinds of, just to keep up appearances. So people will think that you're doing all right. The slow drift to a hard heart usually begins with small things. When I was in college, I went to a Christian college and with some of my Christian friends in California. It was a good school too. But I didn't realize that after a while my heart began slowly becoming callous and hard. I didn't know. I didn't realize it. So my sophomore year, my freshman year, I pretty much went to church most Sundays, and I went to chapel they had 2 or 3 chapels a week. I don't remember. I went to most of them, and I enjoyed it, and I hung out with Christian friends. And then the second year, I went to church about half the time, went to chapels about half the time. And I started hanging out with people that weren't interested in that. And by the third year, I just barely went. All the while, I'm taking various courses. Some of them are Bible courses. And I would go to church, and I think, why do I need to go to church? I already know all this. Guess what I was full of? And I slowly began dating someone who at the time didn't go to church, didn't want to. She knew the Lord at one time, but she drifted away herself. And I stopped reading the Bible on a regular basis, in fact, almost completely for a while. It was a setup. I ignored the basics. There are some basics to keep your spiritual life and marriage intact. And thank God he got a hold of me and woke me up. Here's some basics. Church attendance does matter. It matters. Even if you already know everything I've ever, you're way ahead of me. And there are people here who have more education than I do. They're smarter than I am. They have more theological training than I do. Even if you think you've heard the story before, here's what couples say. And here's what they found for these surveys. Couples have a much more likely chance of staying married if they go to church regularly. In fact, they had a 46% less chance of divorce if they went to church regularly. Interestingly enough, if they only go to church once in a while, once every 2-3 months, they have a 10% greater chance of divorcing than if you don't go to church at all. Isn't that weird? Not sure why that is, but church attendance matters. Also, and this is one of the biggest ones of all, are you in it to win it? Are you going to give unconditional, committed love? Are you absolutely all in? It's interesting, 8 in 10 couples who divorce, this was hard to believe. I just had to reread it. 8 in 10 said that when they were getting married, they thought to themselves, I don't know if this is going to work. It's like going up to the plate. I don't think I'm going to get a hit. Well, you probably won't. You're in it to win it. That's why you give a vow. Sickness and in health. Richer for poor. I'm in it. I'm just in it. Period. End of story. We're not going to ever say the D word here. We're just not going to say the D word. We're not going to divorce. We might murder each other. We're not going to say the D word. We're just not. We're going to work it through. Men are 50% more likely to end up divorced when they said their partner's looks were all important to them. Women were 60% more likely to divorce if how much money their husband made really mattered to them. Why in it? A good marriage needs love and respect. The Apostle Paul gives the main method to keep a couple healthy in Ephesians 5:33. Let each one of you in particular so love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respect her husband. If Christian couples would choose to put that verse in practical reality, the divorce rate would be almost non-existent, especially among Christians anyway. Husbands, love your wives. Many people have tried to describe what love is. Jennifer Aniston, the actress, said this: I love that feeling of being in love. The effect of having butterflies when you wake up in the morning. That is so special. Well, maybe. I'm sorry, Jennifer, if you somehow heard this message. Maybe so. Maybe it is. But I believe the best definition of love is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy. It's not boastful. It's not conceited. Does not act improperly. Is not selfish. Is not easily provoked, and does not keep a record of wrongs. Love doesn't keep good records of wrongs that your husband or wife has done. It's not that if you really love each other, you're not going to say, well, 20 years ago, I'll never forget when you, oh, that's dirty pool. Anybody here ever done anything wrong as a husband or wife? Anything at all? Do you love it when your spouse keeps bringing it up? Am I wrong here? Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, rejoices in truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Husbands, if you want a summer wife, you can't bring home winter weather. Wives, respect your husbands. That reminds me, I heard about a mom who checked on her daughter and friends and overheard them playing wedding. The wedding vows went something like this. You have the right to remain silent. Anything can and will be held against you. Maybe you have failed in your spiritual life. Maybe you've failed in a past marriage and you're remarried and divorced and all that. Maybe it's happened more than once. Maybe as a single person you've given in to sinful things. Maybe in your marriage, you're lacking in some of these areas and other areas, and, feel like a failure. And, yeah, you probably have done some failing. I know I have. But what I love about Jesus, what I love about our God, what I love about the kingdom of God is that for you and I, failure is not the end. Remember John chapter 4. Jesus is talking to the woman at the well in the middle of the day, which was kind of a no-no for a Jewish person from the southern kingdom to talk to a Samaritan from the northern kingdom of Israel. Samaritans were considered kind of mutts or mongrels. They'd intermarried, and Jews were the more, purebred Jew or whatever. And so they were walking through Samaria, which the Jews didn't do. And they're walking through, and the disciples were, why are we going here, Jesus, kind of thing. He said, basically, he ignored them, and he went through Samaria, and he's there, and this woman comes out, and remember, she's there, and she's getting some water at the well, and Jesus walks out, and he starts talking to her. And as they're chatting, and about whatever, and the whole conversation necessarily isn't recorded, but she begins to think, there's something different about it. Why are you talking to me anyway? You're a Jew talking to me. And then he says something amazing to her. He says, oh, by the way. And she says, I'll go get my husband. And he said, well, actually, you've had 5 of them. And the man you're living with right now is not your husband. Sir, I perceive you're a prophet. And then she goes, this 5-time divorcee, now living with somebody, she goes and begins to tell the city, all the people she knew, come see the man who told me everything I'd ever done. Come, let's come. She became the first evangelist. The first evangelist. By all standard, by certain church standards anyway, she would be a total failure, totally unusable to King Jesus. But that's not how Jesus sees us. He sees us as people that he can transform and touch and change and mold just by coming in contact. And then she was so blown away. Come see this man who told me everything. Come see him. And she led people to Christ. That's really what she did. Now, if God can use her, how many know he can use you? We're going to take communion, which I think is fitting. We're talking about communion in marriage and in relationships, and now we're going to be doing that. But as Phil comes up, where's Phil? There he is. Okay, come on up, Phil. I'm going to leave you with this little poem by a guy. I rarely do poems. I know that's kind of a Baptist thing to do. You got to always throw a poem in. You got to have 3 illustrations and 3 points, and you got to throw in a poem. But this one's good. Listen to this short one by Ogden Nash is his name. Just listen to this. To keep your marriage brimming with love in the loving cup, whenever you're wrong, admit it. Whenever you're right, shut up.